You're listening to Podcast with Curtis Mack.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Curtis Mack. Welcome to Podcast with Curtis Mack, 2023 edition. And I have a special guest with me. He's been in the booth with me for an interview or two once back in the day when I was in college. But without further ado, what's going on, Steve?
Not much, Curtis. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here.
I guess I'd be classified as an academic. Work in private institution and higher education, two different ones, one facet and another, and hold multiple positions there. So
Sure. So how long have you been in the academic world?
forever. Starting off as a student myself, 18 years old, went into teaching right out of college, and then after that stayed in academia, not as a teacher, but later as an adjunct faculty member, but most of the time I've been in academia in one way, shape, or form. I worked with Youth Consultation Services. I worked with Devereaux. I worked with Centenary University. I worked with Fairleigh Dickinson University, County College of Morris. So I've kind of been around a little bit. Worked at Greystone Psychiatric Hospital for a little while.
How was that?
Interesting.
Pretty sure my grandma was there.
I did an internship there and in college at Rutgers University, and worked in the in one unit that was pretty hectic, and saw some pretty life-opening things, when it comes to, running into day-to-day scenarios with the severely mentally ill.
Sure. As you know, I also teach myself a little bit. I'm certified to substitute teach in New Jersey, and I taught autistic preschool the other day. That was definitely an eye-opening experience.
That's a difficult gig. I interviewed at a job. One of the first teaching jobs was at a school that was for autistic children. And after just watching, in the first 3 minutes, I saw one of the kids biting a woman in the arm, and then another kid spitting in a woman's face. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. And like you said, you have to have the ability to keep your own composure, very good impulse control, because if someone goes and hits you, your first response has to be altered, and that's difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's also when I went through my training, I went through like GCN training and all this stuff for education, and you're not allowed to initiate touching students. You can't do that. You can't touch the students.
Yeah, I had two different trainings. I had SOLVE, which is Strategies of Limiting Violent Episodes, and CPI, Crisis Prevention Intervention, and in both those trainings, it's a defensive training. Like you said, it's to what happens after.
So why is working with maybe kids or students or people in the academic world important to you?
I think it's personally gratifying. So ultimately it never comes with much money. So it's not ever a draw is that, I'm going to make a ton of money in academia. It's just where you feel like you belong. You have a niche and you're just like, hey, this is what I should be doing. And working with people just has always seemed to be that thing. I've been told by numerous people, which is, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like when people say you have a gift, and it comes from, numerous people, you listen to that. You take heed and say, hey, you know what? Maybe there is something here. Maybe this is something I'm good at.
Yeah, when I was in college, when I was in Centenary University, I thought like tutors were for dummies. I'm like, oh, a tutor? What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden the library has like on-call tutors to read your papers and edit and check the grammar and the word choice. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. This is like a free editing software, but a human being.
Yeah.
And that's where we connected.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the problem is that negative stigma people come in with about tutors. And the librarian in general, and not knowing the resources that they have and what they're there for. And even the public library is there to assist its patrons. It's there to help out people in their community. And I just think it's like a untapped resource that no one really, takes advantage of. And same in academia. The only thing is that once people cross that threshold and they decide to come into the library, then they realize like, holy Christ, my whole educational experience is going to be different because it's going to be a lot easier because of this route.
Yeah, I used to lock in, dude. I used to go in there and lock in for like an hour and a half or more, just straight, and then just here I am, I'm in the library. It was almost like another course.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. My undergraduate, I just remember sitting there and then going finding my spot, sitting there, and 3-4 hours goes by, and you're like, dude, I just pounded away some heavy duty academics.
Yeah,
and then you're ready.
Yeah, and then you get someone like yourself or whomever at the time could take a look at it, and because an extra set of eyes on your work is always good, no matter if you're writing something or editing something, whatever it may be. So.
Of course, and you tend not to read over your own own errors. You read it the way you want it to say in your head, not what it actually says on paper.
Sure.
So a lot of times you'll have the wrong thing there, and it's better to have the second pair of eyes, like you said.
I remember Dr. Severe never used to use the word you.
Yeah.
When you're writing. So if you use you more than 3 times in your paper, you'd fail you. You know. So I'm like, well, what do I use instead of you? It's like an individual, one.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not supposed to talk directly at the person.
And how punny is it that his name is Severe?
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh
pretty
God,
severe,
he was a great teacher.
Yeah, he was, and you miss him. I think he's at Valparaiso right now.
Oh, God bless him.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of memorable moments, what was your most memorable moment when it came to the academic world?
One young lady, she had it rough. I tutored her, and she decided that her last semester she's going to go off on her own and be able to, to go through school without any academic help whatsoever. She failed the research methods class that she really needed to take, and then so she had to take it again. And then she failed it a second time. And when she failed it the second time, the school pretty much gave her the exit. They said, you're done. The only way she could get back in, and you're talking about a senior now with 114 credits, 115 credits.
Almost there.
She had to go back past that class because she had one more chance at it. But before that, she had to go to community college and have a decent enough GPA to bring it up to go reapply. So she had to reapply to school. When she was at school, her dad had rented out her room to somebody else because he needed the extra income.
Sure.
So she ended up having to do a semester going to community college and sleeping on her couch in the living room.
Place.
In her own place.
Jeez
so
Louise.
it's rough. She got back in, and then she came to me and said, look, I want to work with you. I got to take these 3 classes, which is 12 credits, and I'm going to be completely honest. I need your help. I said, if you regiment Monday and Wednesday, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock every day, that I put on the schedule, you come in those Mondays and Wednesdays, and we'll do this. So she did, and she ended up finishing with a 4.0 that semester. She graduated. She passed the research methods class with an A, obviously.
Nice.
And then, so ultimately, the most gratifying part is that, she didn't take out that $47,000 worth of loans for nothing.
Yeah.
She graduated. I think one of the most glorifying things is to see that. Now, she'd asked about me, I heard, like 2 years ago or something like that. And that's, nice that she remembers you, the assistance that you gave her. But, I just think it's, one of those jobs where you help people. Then down the road, you start to wonder, what did that person ever become? What did that, what did happen to Curtis Mack, And then all of a sudden you're sitting here and you're like, all right.
I'm in the podcast with him. What's going on?
Exactly.
So who inspired you to do this?
You know what? The first time I think I've ever had help, and this is real deep and emotional here, but I was 9, and my dad had just passed away, and my aunt had spoken to me for about 3.5 hours. And she talked to me, telling me things are going to be all right, this and that. And she was the first person that ever had like a really deep, long talk with me. And when you sat there and as you got older, you started to realize that, what? Sometimes, people that are a little bit more intelligent have things to say. And for those people that are willing to listen, there's a lot of good advice that can be taken from that. And so for me, it was her probably motivating me that things are going to be all right, things are going to move on, and to do it. And then as I grew older myself, I started to witness friends, other people started to have problems and whatnot, and then you just talk to them, and then you just realize that you have a niche for helping other people, and then you're like, what? I don't have to get paid for it, but this is just something I choose to do. You just be a decent human being to other people, and next thing you know what? You help a slew of people on the way.
It's 100%. And with that being said, they say information is power, right? But nowadays, information is so accessible, but it's not necessarily the right information. Sometimes it's information overload.
Certainly.
So taking it old school and talking to a human being that's been through it might be a better resource for information to guide whomever into through their situation, rather than steering to the phone and say, oh, okay, I have this problem. What do I do?
Yeah.
Versus asking a real human being that's been there in the 80s or 90s or earlier,
Sure. And I, for a long time, I thought it was going to revert back to that. But I think the internet and everything that's gone on has put it out there where, everyone's going to self-diagnose everything that they've got. And they're going to do it because they have WebMD at their fingertips and everything else. And I'm going to ask Google, why does this happen? But I mean, that's the problem is that, just getting out there and talking to somebody. Sometimes it's just talking. It's not even getting answers. It's just being heard. You know, some people just want to be heard, you know, and once they get it off their chest. I mean, you ever have that situation in a general psych class I took a long time ago? The professor told me if you're really irritated with somebody, write them a letter about how pissed off you are about it. And then after you're done, read it out back to yourself. Then once you're done with that, rip it up and throw it in the garbage and don't ever think about doing anything that you wrote in that letter ever again. You know, when you get to meet somebody, you know, you get one, representation of how they might be outside of this. And it doesn't deviate too far from what you really meet them. I mean, some people do get real loosened up and, you know, become a different way. But I've had professors that numerous times I was like, dude, I could do this job better than this guy can.
I've said that
you
a
know?
million times
And then,
about so many different positions, you know?
I know. So then you sit there and you're like, well, then prove it. You know, go out and prove it. But I'm only proving it to myself. That's why, you know, you become an adjunct professor so you could teach the class. And then, you know, you get graded by the students and they do the evaluation and student opinion reports, the SORs. And you read what they have to say, and it's enlightening. Because
I feel the same way about substituting.
At, you know?
Because after I substitute, before I substitute, the kids are like, "Oh my God, Mr. Mack's gonna be here today."
Yeah,
like that's powerful. The school should recognize that. That if they're that psyched about me subbing a week from now, obviously I have something to offer. You know, or at least, you know, and I got that from you and from the people at Centenary. Like, that's what you became an adjunct, I became a sub. That's why I did it, you know, and that to reconnect with old connections and reestablish that, but also to mentor the kids. I feel like sometimes I could have more of an impact in 7 hours with those 25 kids per every 40 minutes than their teacher can in an entire school year.
Sure.
Because if you could relate to them, then...
Exactly, and it's even just wanting to relate to them, you know, because a lot of people, it's you know, it's time clock job. You go in, you check in, all right, this kid's, you know, they just want to get the year over to get a new batch of kids. You know, being in education, you know, you're sitting there and you're like, hey, look, you know what? I find this is an opportunity to make as much of a difference as possible in that limited amount of time. So taking advantage of that is, like you said, got a lot of attributes of the you know, successful people in that sense with working with people. Of course, the money is horrible.
The money is horrible. They just upped the rates in Jefferson Township, but in the Hackettstown district, they're not the best. They're not the best anywhere. You know, I know Dover is probably the highest paying one in northern New Jersey. It's like $250 a day for substitutes, and then you have the stigma of like, oh my God, well half the kids can't speak English, so what am I going to do? How am I going to teach? So then people don't even try. And also the glass ceiling, or like the amount of holes or hoops you have to jump through to become, you know, at least a sub. Like, oh my gosh, it's like background check, fingerprint, transfer your ID, do this, do that, do this, do training,
transcripts,
all this stuff, you know, unofficial transcripts, official transcripts, all this stuff, and you're like a pile of stuff, and you're like, you show up for work, you don't get paid for the training, you don't get paid for the R&D that you have to do for all that kind of stuff, you don't get paid for any of it, and then you show up, and then they're like, okay, $100 for today, and you're like, dude, I could have made like I could have sold a stereo in my garage for $100.
Yeah.
You know, so, but like you said, you got to want to do it.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not about the money, unfortunately. It would be nice if it could be compensated, but it's not.
So that kind of brings me to one of my topics I want to talk to you about today, more or less, and dive into it, is because like people that are teaching our youth, through the public system, the government system, whatever you want to call it, even private sector, like they don't necessarily get paid the most to teach kids. And then on the other hand, you have people that are public figures that are out there, you know, Nicki Minaj, Snoop Dogg, and all these rappers and celebrities that are influencing the kids, but not necessarily in the best way, right? You know, do drugs, shake your ass, drive a fast car, you know, F the police, and all this stuff that's coming from maybe what environment that individual grew up in, but for some reason that mentality is idolized and then commercialized and then sold and broadcasted to these kids that barely want to pay attention to school because their teacher's not getting paid enough to keep their attention. So now they're watching Snoop Dogg videos in the back, and then all of a sudden you see, you know, Nicki Minaj or somebody like that, you know, on these like MTV awards and all that, and you're like, oh my God, they're really doing it, you know. And then on my end, I'm like, well, what's Viacom doing, you know, having this guy influence kids? Don't you know what he does? So it's like, how does that, like, you know, the kids gravitate towards that. So I know that there's a little bit of narcissism that the higher ups like in individuals to, promote that individual. I'm above the law type
Sure.
deal. Maybe you want to tap into that a little bit.
I mean,
here in it.
it's
So.
the trickle down effect, like you were talking about, with going down to the suburbs and having influence on the kids that have no correlation to that type of mentality, that type of upbringing and whatnot. But it sells, and being marketed to kids is another way that kids are going to buy things. Kids are going to occupy the internet. Kids are going to be more susceptible to advertisements than adults would be, and people set in their ways. They set modern trends, and like you said, with the narcissism aspect, I mean, it goes everywhere. It's in politics, it's everywhere, and that's the problem with it. I mean, you see the Donald Trump with the NFTs, and people don't come to the reality that these people are making money. That's what they're doing. That's what their job is.
Yeah.
To be cool enough just to make money.
If you're not paying for the product, you're usually the product.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Exactly.
So I would love to ask you, like, straight up, like, what is that? Why is gang violence or stripping or dancing explicitly or getting in trouble and being above the law or outside the law, like, why is that so attractive to everyone?
Well, it's attractive to a certain base. Like, it's not
True.
attractive. It a lot of people the bad boy attitude comes with this lifestyle that they feel is unattainable unless you're bad boy. If you're not a gangster, if you're not, this person who's got, the fast cars and F the police and that kind of attitude, you're not going to get that, the high up on that hierarchy. And if you're a guy who studies regularly and whatnot, how cool is that? You're not going to sell that to people, but what you can sell is, this and these fast cars and fast women and stuff, because it's idolized in our society. It shows success. It shows that they've made it in one way, shape, or form.
In the most forward aspect, it's like it's all just a show. It's marketing. It's smoke and mirrors, and the people that are seeing that don't realize that it's smoke and mirrors.
Exactly.
So now when they go for guidance, they don't ask their teacher. They go and they watch a video of Tory Lanez or something, and then that's the way they this is the way I should think or approach things.
Yeah, I read today a 14-year-old kid was gunned down in Georgia, and he was killed by a 16-year-old kid. And the whole thing took place over a social media beef that the two had. And then one showed up at a house with guns, and then they, left. And then that kid went back with his friends with their guns, and a bunch of people were shot. I think 3 people were shot, 2 people were killed. But I mean, here's your social media and your gang, type mentality. And then unfortunately, you see this stuff go, and it becomes, how they relate becomes real. All of a sudden you want that stuff, and then when the kid has a gun, now it is real. And now, now that whole lifestyle that, was acted upon by these actors, because that's what they are when they get older. Snoop Dogg is acting, like...
Publicly,
hey,
though.
Yes, publicly, and in everyone's eyes. These kids aspired to this, and here it is over social media, and now some kid's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. Because of a decision that he made at 14 years old. Based
on what he thought, he should be idolizing, and that's what I'm saying. Why is that lifestyle idolized by most? It's so weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of the downfalls in our society is that, that the people that are out there, the Dr. Fauci's aren't being idolized by kids. They're not saying, or like, it's some scientist at Pfizer who's helping, save tons of lives by trying to come up with something.
They're actually almost demonized.
I know, yeah, and that's the whole point. So, I mean, there was a time when I was in the late 90s when, all my buddies were going to college.
Back in the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, everyone started to swerve from the medical field to financial.
Sure.
And it was just because everyone's worried about the financial stability, and it's like, well, a doctor's going to get sued for X, Y, and Z, so let's steer more toward the financial districts. And a lot of my friends who were going to be doctors ended up going, and working on Wall Street. Sure. And I mean, it's about the money for them as well.
And now, for me, I put it on Facebook the other day. I'm very vocal. I had an opportunity to work with WNBC, CBS, all these like high-end news places. But I'm like, once you take a job as a reporter there, you have to be very careful on what you do and what you say. So I turned it down. So I had 2 opportunities to work in the helicopter. I think it was for WNBC, but I turned it down because I don't want to be known for this and then be stuck to it and then ridiculed and criticized. But so anyway, on my Facebook, I posted, like, I watched the new Pinocchio. Did you see it?
No.
Oh my God, dude, it gave me nightmares.
Seriously.
Swear to God, because this show, it was PG, but the message behind it was giving me chills the whole time. It was this little boy, that passed away, and the father tried to recreate him in the second, version of him, which was a wooden version.
Mm-hmm.
But that boy was supposed to go to school and stay on his academics and become a XYZ and stay on track. And all of a sudden, I don't know if it's supposed to be the devil, but it looked like the devil. This guy ran a circus, and he kept trying to get Pinocchio on his way to school to join the circus and sign a contract for show business. And he eventually did it. And then he turned out that it all got burned and crashed to the ground immediately, and he wasn't sending money back to Pinocchio's papa and all this stuff, and lying to him and using him and all this stuff, and he went in it so innocently into show business, and now he was being used and manipulated and exploited and and all this stuff. So I'm like, Jesus Christmas, I see all these people doing TikToks and stuff, and I'm like, what is everyone trying out for the effing circus, dude? Like, it seems like everyone wants to be a circus act. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And it's like, I could either shake my ass, I can swallow 10 gallons of vodka, whatever they want to do to get seen. It's like, it seems like everyone's trying out to be a circus act.
Yeah, and that's again, it's one of the downfalls that we've had with social media and the internet. It's
talent show for assholes, some people call it.
Pretty much, I mean, you get to that point where you're just like, you only hope that people are dying over stupid stuff. I saw the one day, and you guys probably saw this, is that a guy was doing a selfie by the train tracks.
Yes.
And he got hit by a train. It's doing 114 miles an hour.
Well, who put that train there?
Yeah, exactly. And you're sitting here like, but to what end are these people? I hear about people falling off cliffs, taking selfies in these opportunities. I mean, this is what we've become as a society.
I think
negative repercussions.
If you're so easily influenced, then maybe you shouldn't be out in public. I don't know. One new song comes out, and then everyone buys that car. Everyone does this. It's like, geez Louise, like, are you that easily swayed?
Well, like I said, again about the marketing and the advertising and the power that these companies have over people. I worry about it with kids. You sit there and you're like, my kids aren't going to be easily influenced. When I was growing up, I mean, as negative as people might see it, I just didn't follow the trends with a lot of things. And then now I see that as an adult, you're right. As a kid, it's a waste of tons of money. I mean, and my daughter was worried about a situation because she didn't have an iPhone, and people would mock her for having an Android. And I was like, are you serious? Like, you're serious? And she's like, yeah. I mean, that's where we've come in our society.
The fear of missing out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, or being ridiculed for,
thinking different.
Yeah, yours isn't as good as everyone else. And I was like, they're the lemmings. You're not, I mean, here's the situation, you've got to, deviate from what the norm is, because sometimes the norm is craziness in itself. They're not thinking about their long-term futures.
No.
A lot of people. And so when they follow these trends and they buy these things that they buy, you're buying them to impress the Joneses. And at the same time, to what avail? The Joneses are going to move in 3 years.
Yeah.
And then what?
And they're financed by somebody you're not even seeing,
Exactly.
behind the scenes. And it's all an act. And that's why, if there's one course, if you don't want to go to college, there's one course I suggest everyone takes. Is like sociology of media or psychology of media.
Definitely.
Because you'll understand, oh my God, everything is staged. Like Jersey Shore. They were paid $20,000, I think, minimum per episode, but they're not allowed to use their phones. They had to use the duck phones. They can't use this. There's certain things that people do, they make them do, and then they film it, and they're like, oh my God, that's real. And it's like, no, it's not the case.
Exactly.
It's not the case. Just because you see it on TV doesn't mean it's real,
Yeah.
And with this TikTok stuff and a lot of the, everyone, you say everyone wants to be in medical, then finance, and now it seems like everyone wants to be in broadcast media or production now, and that's cool. That's cool and all, but for people like me, I'm a little like, I don't know, I jealous or taken back or upset because, I worry about headroom and lead room and the right mic and, the aggregate device and audio visual and channels in and output and all this stuff. And then meanwhile, I go on, see News 12. They use somebody's flip phone camera video to broadcast the news, look at this. And it's like someone's shaking their camera. I'm like, you really put that video out? That's the production value that you're allowing your organization to have. It's like the simpler, the better, the shittier, the better, because it's like, oh, look at this.
Yeah, well, you come from an area where, you feel like you shouldn't provide a watered down version of anything. And the problem is in our society, sometimes that's the easiest thing to do. And like you said, it's being infiltrated by people that shouldn't be in the field because, like you said, they just want to be out there. They just want to be like, I have a say, or look at me, X, Y, Z factor. And that's why he said people are coming into that field more that probably shouldn't be there.
No.
I think that there will be a benefit to it, because some people that would never have a niche for it, like yourself, all of a sudden realize, holy, this is my place. And then once you get to that point, like I said, you're just like, wow. Like I said with me and in teaching, all of a sudden you sit there and you've had professors and you're like, dude, you suck at this.
You suck, yeah.
But you've got a PhD and you're respected in this field, and you're like, I could do this job so much better than you and so more effective, and so much more effective. And then so in your aspect, you've got that situation where you're in the same thing with media and you're like, dude, this is not right. I could do this 10 times better.
But, circling back to the content and like being influenced and stuff, like it's so crazy how watered down everything is, and at the same time how easily influenced everyone is. And then I feel like the higher ups, I don't know who's running what, for what platform, but they take people that are, I don't know, like have a previous background of being followed, and they use those people to push whatever message they want to push.
Of course. And why? It's because they got a proven track record. Whenever you follow that route where you get people that have been successful at gathering large bunches of people, for whatever purpose, that's who you utilize down the road. That's why you see actors revisit, certain products again, or that's why you see like politicians, will be moved from the state level to the federal level, because I'm no longer going to be a state senator. I'm going to be this, and I'm going to run for president or something. But it's because they've had that following, and that's how they progress. Part of human nature is moving up that evolutionary ladder in whatever you're doing, and for a lot of people that ladder is important, because with it comes prestige or whatever. So in any kind of job, people want to get up to the next rung, because like you said, we see them from below and say we could do it better than they can, so that progression up is
but that process is not expedited in any way, and
No.
everyone thinks it is, I think, nowadays.
And at the same time, there's companies that don't respect the people that want to move up. There's certain patterns that they have to follow to get there, while other people remain dormant and staying at the same area. So it is difficult in some places, or it's not vetted, like you said. In other places, that people just go right to the top.
Yeah, because what I've seen, Stephen, I would love your opinion on this. Is I've said this so many different times. If you do something bad, good enough, you will not be scolded. You'll actually be rewarded. So, it's like for somebody, let's just say somebody takes, back in the day, if, you put any Disney characters in front of your business, you're going to get a cease and desist from Disney if someone sees it somehow, somewhere.
Sure.
But now somebody makes a TikTok and they make a bedazzled version of Mickey Mouse or whoever, and instead of like, oh my God, this got 30 million views, it's like, okay, it's still copyright infringement or, defamation, whatever law that it still was, but since it got so many views, they're like, actually, we'll take that idea and we'll endorse you. Rather than, sending you a cease and desist letter. It's like, oh, how did you do that? So if you do something bad, good enough, you're endorsed. Same thing with Snoop Dogg. I mention him a lot, but like for me, he's in the public eye.
It's his track record, they had it where he was idolized by a certain group, and that group ages just like everybody else. So, they can, the group that's been following him since the mid-90s, they're probably still, tuning into him with Martha Stewart. Because you've had that audience, they know who he is. He's a cult figure. And the problem is like, it doesn't matter how derogatory the things are that he does.
Like, how do you have Cardi B and Nicki Minaj doing voice characters for Disney characters?
Yeah.
And how?
Like
they talk about, wet ass and all that. They got rid of the Baby It's Cold Outside song, but yet the number one song on the chart for 2 months during that period was wet ass.
Yeah. Well,
so,
like you said,
like what?
The companies are selling out. The companies are selling out and going for the money. They know that these people are going to produce money, push their moral values aside, and they say, you know what, we're going to do this because this is what's going to take the cake.
Like explicit material, sex, drugs, money, rock and roll,
if you
all
think
that.
about those executives and whatnot, they're there for, say they're there for 12 years. All they're doing is, you're getting closer to retirement. You're making as much money as you possibly can to retirement. You're not trying to leave the place better, morally or financially responsible than when you got there. You're going to take.
But what about the kids, dude?
But that's the whole thing. The kids is, they're sitting there and they're like, well, if you're a good parent, your kids won't know who Nicki Minaj is when they're 9 years old.
Meanwhile, then I turn on Nickelodeon or Disney, and then she's either voicing a character or hosting a show.
Exactly. And that leads the kids to experiment more with, getting in their devices and looking up these people and seeing the explicitness of it. And then that's where, the whole parental thing
So the audacity for, higher ups putting those people in positions to influence my kids or the kids is like so appalling to me. Everyone's so ready to attack Kanye, and it's like, at least the dude's speaking his mind. You know what I mean? Like, how can you be mad for somebody to speaking their mind? And if he's sick, he's sick. Get him some help. But they don't even want to address the fact that these girls that are shaking their ass on TV and music and all this shit, it's good. And then, those are the people, they can host the shows for the kids and tell them that this is a good idea, or to do this or be there. Or
yeah, like you said, the whole vetting of those people and making the decisions are made in a room that will have no idea what takes place. Probably a bunch of people that are sitting there that are weighing the pros and cons of everything, and then they have to do it. I mean, I heard about Kanye's comments. I heard it took Adidas a very long time for them to come to the conclusion that they're not going to deal with his items anymore and break the contract, which was a huge deal for them. So I mean, there are people who who make those decisions, and ultimately how they get up there, climb the ladder that we're talking about earlier, who knows, but they're the ones that do, produce the product.
It reminds me of like WWF back in the day, like Eddie Guerrero, lie, cheat, and steal. Like that was his MO. That was his mantra: lie, cheat, and steal, and everyone loved it. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that was his name and that was his thing. So it's like,
well, it follows the premise. I mean, it's harder to work. It's more difficult to work hard and get the things that you want than it is to lie, cheat, and steal, because then you can obtain the things the fastest route. Lie, cheating, and stealing is the quickest way of getting to those means that you believe you want. Mm-hmm. Not the stuff that you need, but the things you want. But yeah, if you're going to work hard, it's going to take excessive period of time, and no one wants to deal with the grind.
Nobody. And then they look at somebody like me. They're like, oh, you're this amount of age, and you've said you've done this, and you've accomplished this, but you only drive a Honda.
Yeah.
And
well, because some people place the value of you on what you're driving.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to turn to them and be like, look, man, I'm very satisfied with who I am.
Yes.
Even though I drive a Honda.
If you're not 20 something with a Lamborghini, a couple girls with their ass hanging out, and jewelry on, you're nobody.
Yeah. That's unfortunately what people find is successful in this country.
Yeah.
Is that type of person. It's spun out of control with the successful rate of this country when you have Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these people worth billions, and yet they're not using their money for the best cause possible.
Yeah.
And when you see like Bill Gates, who is who does a ton for society and a ton for different groups. And these other guys, it's ridiculous. I had read one thing that said that Bezos during COVID, he had made so much money in the span from that March from lockdown till September that he could have given every employee at Amazon an $80,000 raise and not had tipped into and not set them back financially more than they had started. So he'd actually grossed so much in profit that he could have literally given every employee an $80,000 raise. You know what that would have done for our economy? How many Amazon employees across the country would have gotten an $80,000 raise, where that money would have gone? Because, it would have been spent. Because, you know what? Amazon employees are going to spend money.
Well, yeah.
You give $80,000 to a person who's got $275,000 in the bank, all you're going to have is someone with, $325,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
Who doesn't care because they don't need the money. They're not going to spend it.
Yeah.
But if they did decide to do something with their money, things could be accomplished.
It's just so weird because you have these influence of like, okay, here's street life. Street life is glorified. And then you got like things that happen like the shutdown, the government pandemic and all that, blah, blah, blah. And then they were starting to give people money that they never even seen before too. This is switching gears a little bit. The $1,200 stimulus checks for the people that were making minimum wage. And that money all went into the black market because half of the people that are getting that money were influenced or are influenced by the social icons that are saying buy drugs and go to the strip club and all this stuff. So it's like the government's handing out these fat checks and people are just, going out and spending it on the black market. It did nothing for the economy.
Well, I don't know. Well, for me, I spent it on, paying down debt and having some home renovations done, So, I was able to get caught up a little bit. My friends around me and my, base, the people I assume with, we spent it. We spent it on things that, very few of them saved it, but necessity stuff too.
Sure.
People went out and bought tires. People went out and, and did some positive
Which
things.
you were hoping that was what happened with that money.
But I mean, you know what? If the government's going to go sit there and bail out the car industry and they're going to bail out the banks, you might as well bail out the American person. You know, I mean, come on now. You know, I have nothing to do with, you know, Ford. And then when that whole shit went down in 2008 and the government said we're going to step in and help them, it took me a while to understand and comprehend what exactly was going on. And what happened is with the car industry, there were so many people working for the car industries that if it collapsed, the state unemployment in Michigan would have collapsed itself, which would have needed federal government dollars to come in and step in, which would have, you know, took our domestic gross profit and driven it down the toilet, because you'd have to be paying all these hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that work in the car industry unemployment every month, every week, you know, so that money would have depleted it. And no company should get so big where it drains the state's unemployment. But that's what the car industry was. So, I mean, the car industry had to be saved. And I was sitting there and I was like, was I glad my tax money is going to Ford? I'll never buy a Ford. But the point is that that's where it was going, to Chrysler, this and that. So when the SUVs started getting smaller and people stopped buying SUVs.
They stopped making V6s and they stopped doing all this shit.
And everyone's like, okay, well, what's going on? I'm like, I don't care. Because you know what? The few that want them will go find it and be able to buy it. But do we need these, you know, these huge gas guzzlers, you know, that are sitting out there, you know, that are too big to fail? You know, constantly being made. Like, there's a niche. There's a certain group of people that are going to buy those. That's absolutely fine. But to mass produce them on a level where you have tons left over every year, you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, not a good idea.
No, and not just that, but I mean, you drive down the car dealerships. You ever think about, like, in a car dealership when you're looking by and you pass one car dealership, a second car dealership, a third car dealership, how much water they must spend on washing those cars to put them on the lot?
Yeah.
Because every bad weather, and you're like, there's hundreds of cars that need to be washed.
Yeah.
And you're like, but that car wash, are they doing anything more for the water for that town? No, they're just depleting the reservoirs because they want to wash their cars so they can sell their cars to make profit.
Yeah, well, it dives into so many things. It's like new development in places when you add new apartments. It's like, well, there's 300 new families. Well, how's that going to work? One example is like Hackettstown. I know in Independence and Great Meadows, they're putting up, you know, apartment buildings.
Sure.
New ones. And my sister's on the fire department. They don't have a fire truck that goes 3 stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, did you think about that?
And they're not, because then all of a sudden what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to pass some referendum in the town to expand the elementary school. You know, and put on an extra edition, because now you got 300 new units. Well, did you think they're not coming with kids? And then you get into the whole, you know, mix of like why things in our society are slowly, you know, dissipating into, the point where you can't even, you know, fix a lot of it, where you just have to add on, and they band-aid everything until, you know, we can get ourselves in a better predicament.
And another thing, like talking about the education and the systems a little bit, like people talk about free college. When I was in school on economics, they taught me free college is not a good thing at all. Because what happens is the people that can go to university or a university, however you say, it depends where you're from. I guess some people out of state or out of country call it just university. So, but when you go to a university, you know, you're either accepted through an educational opportunity program or a grant or some type of scholarship, or you have really good grades, right? You go in there or you can afford it. Your parents can afford it. So, and then the people that necessarily can't afford it or don't have the best grades or maybe, you know, whatever it is, they go into county. And then the people that can't afford or can't get into county go into trade school or want to take a different route. But if you make county college free, the county college more or less doesn't necessarily have a GPA requirement to get in. But as soon as you make it free, all of a sudden CCM might now put a 3.0 GPA requirement to get in. So now the people that would normally go in there won't even make it in there, because the kids that want to go to university say, why would I just go to university when I could just do 2 years at my county college and then go out from there? So then you're messing up the enrollment opportunity for the kids that normally might get that junior college education, won't get it anymore.
Problem is that ultimately when you're dealing with the community college, the free community college, the problem is where's the money going to come from? Because then you're talking about increasing the amount of full-time faculty you're going to need, staff for the even land, you know, for parking spaces and stuff like that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're going to have to eliminate something somewhere.
Yeah, and it's difficult in that sense. They're not going to be able to disseminate and be able to put any restrictions because it's a community college. But you know, like you said, the thing is that other schools might be able to readjust their articulation agreements with those community colleges because they don't like the product that's being pumped out, so they might raise it. The problem with school finances in general is that no one's capped it. No one's in politics is taking it on and needs to take it on because the situation is just getting worse. As more grants and student aid is available, it increases the prices of colleges. And why? Because they can. So that's why you go and you find a book that's $165 for a class, when if you were to buy it, off the street. It's $28, but why is it so expensive? Well, it's in need, and there's gonna be a new edition next year, and we have to sell books, and that's what we have to do.
Well, and according to half these rappers and all these people online and the videos I watch, I don't have to go to school, and it's stupid.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately that's the path that they've been able to
Anybody
to
that
exploit.
goes to college is an idiot, and they're not making millions and driving a Lambo.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
And that's the thing is like, those people are going to put that and flaunt that in people's faces who are educated, because they're going to be like, look what I have.
Like 50 Cent, I told you, he tweeted the other day, I didn't go to Harvard, but the people that work for me do.
Yeah.
Or did.
That goes to the whole premise of like, look how fast I'm able to do this. And that's the thing. Like I said.
And how did he do it?
He was able to break into, to the scene, whether it was from movies or it was, getting into a record label to sign them. But he was able to backdoor it into our society.
So, and I understand that was his way out, and maybe Nicki Minaj shaking her ass, that was her way out.
There's a different end of the spectrum, though. There's, the people like the Mark Zuckerbergs who go their route, who used education as their thing. And they said, hey, now look at me. I'm the owner of Facebook and, X, Y, and Z, and everyone uses it. And you know what? Snoop Dogg uses my Facebook and, all these people. And so they're like, yeah, you're not, I'm where I am because of X, Y, and Z. And you got LeBron James, who, goes a different route and, gets up there and whatnot and values education, but at the same time doesn't have one himself. He never sought that out. Now maybe he will after his playing days are over. I mean, I'm always look back at some of the people like Shaquille O'Neal and some of the people who left school early and go back to finish their education just to go finish it. That's always important to me to see that people do that.
You told me that when I was in college. You said, for example, I don't know how financially stable Justin Bieber is or whatever it is for now, but I remember you told me somebody like that gets famous very young in their mid-30s, when they can't produce anymore or they're too old, they could be in trouble. No one ever taught them life skills, how to write a check, how to do this, how to do that. Everyone else did it for them and just drained their money. So by the time that they're, out of their prime or not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they have no structure or protocol or anything that they could fall back on.
Yeah.
Or certificates or degrees or anything.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I see a lot of the professional athletes falling into that.
They just become spokespeople.
Yeah, and then I forget the percentage of football players that after their 6 years in the NFL, they, 2 years later, they don't have a dime to their name, and they have to take jobs as coaches at high schools and stuff like that because they're just that desperate for work, because your career is short-lived in that sense. It's difficult, but.
So what have you accomplished? Do you have any accolades that you want to share with everybody?
Advanced degrees are advanced degrees. I don't see them as an accomplishment. There's a lot of things. It's difficult to express what you accomplished. Like I said,
Sure.
My barometer is when I get someone through and they get their degree and knowing that they graduated, that's a huge thing. Yeah,
that's me. Hello.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the accomplishment. I can have diplomas with a bunch of initials after my last name, and it really doesn't mean anything to me. It was part of the process.
Sure.
The people who run the marathon, they run it because they can. So I think academia is the same thing with me. I go through it because I can. And
but it doesn't piss you off a little bit that like somebody made a song about drugs and that it has $1 million now, and you're like, well, shit, I could have did that.
Well, there's a lot of things that I sit there and say, shit, I could have done that. But
Right?
At the same time, you sit there and you're like, do I want to do that? I'm kind of happy being the low-key guy that I am and not getting the publicity and driving the Honda and not getting the 1,000 looks, because I don't need my life any more complicated than it is.
Sure,
and these people do. They do.
For me, it pisses me off so bad because it's like you rap about this or you talk about this and you're talking about explicit life, and then you want to circle back and then do something that now I'm doing too. You want to now influence the kids. You didn't have good intentions from the beginning.
How many football players, do we hear about that do stuff and whatnot, and they come back as commentators and whatnot, and you hear about their personal life, and it's like this guy's beating his wife.
Oh,
and this
all the
guy's
time.
and you're sitting here like, and he's on TV?
Yeah.
Oh, why? Well, yeah, because morally we don't care. This guy sells it, and he's going to watch it, and guess what? I'm sitting there watching it that day, watching this, guy who's been, arrested for domestic violence on 2 different occasions tell me what the spread on the Giants game is.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
it's mind-blowing, too.
It is. You can't, idolize anybody in life. You have to.
Besides Curtis Mack.
Exactly. Because, everyone seems to let you down. As you go through, you find something in their closet that you're just like, oh, my Christ. And the next thing you know, here's this guy with this and this guy with this. And you're like, I should have known.
Overall goals, maybe going into whatever you started, or maybe new ones when you started, and from 9 years old. Or?
Just as I get older, I think that the only goals is that I have is to try to find people like myself and make sure they continue the mission, in that way of like sitting there doing everything that, that's morally the right thing to do.
Morally sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, leave the world a better place, than it was when we were here.
That's not the case anymore, Steve. There's
I
probably
know.
one out of a million people that think that way.
But that's the whole point. The whole point is that, if you're gonna have kids and they're gonna inherit this earth, you want it to be a better place for them. We're gonna be long gone, when their kids have kids and their kids have kids. But I mean, the point is that this can't be enough. This can't be, we can't be okay with the way things are, because we're leaving it for them. And I apologize to my kids all the time, and I say sorry, because we didn't do a good enough job protecting this place. And then ultimately, we're leaving you shit. And I said, hey, if you don't want to have kids, I 100% support you, man.
Yeah.
If I don't never become a grandfather, maybe that'll be my happy moment, knowing that my kids are just going to live the life that they want to live, and when they're done, they're done. Because I mean, maybe the burden of, of us in society, as people like me in society, is knowing that there's going to be generations behind us that have to endure all the shit that we didn't fix,
Yeah, agreed. So, is there anything we didn't cover today?
I think it was a good roundabout for today.
It was, and we'll chop it up and throw it back and forth. If you want to be reached, how can you be reached?
You can reach out to my email, as Steve_MacMillan@hotmail.com.
And now, can they reach out for you maybe for private tutoring or maybe some, what would you say?
At least if I'm not available, we could try to hook you up with someone who is, or find, a way that, we can get you the help that you need to get. Because, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of people out there and a lot of people willing to help and a lot of people that need help. So if we can get the two of them linked together, then everyone's gonna be happier.
What message would you give, maybe not your kids or my kids or me, but anybody out there that's watching that's younger, that is so easily influenced by anything online, and all they have is their phone, that's their escape? What is your message to them?
You got to be true to yourself. At the end of the day, you got to be happy with who you are. Not who you aspire to be, not your goals that you want to accomplish, because things change. But just be, good to who you are. You be that individual. If, hugging your mom at 17 and kissing her on the cheek and saying I love you in front of your friends is what you do, don't stop doing that, because your friends are the people around you, because they'll accept it. You do what you're going to do, what's you. You be your true individual self. I think too many times, we adjust. People, they're embarrassed about what people are thinking. Mm-hmm. Life's too short to worry about those embarrassments.
Spotlight effect. You think everyone's always looking at you, but it's not the case.
Yeah, friends come and go. People come and go. Family's important. And ultimately, just got to be true to yourself.
I remember Dr. Severe made our whole class remember the definition of success according to the On Course book, and it was success is staying on course to your desired outcomes and experiences, gaining happiness, wisdom, and self-worth along the way.
Yeah. That's
so
perfect.
it's like whatever you're doing is, if you're not gaining happiness, wisdom, or self-worth, if it's not taking you on course to your desired outcomes and experiences, stop that right now and cut it off.
Exactly.
Any shout-outs?
Nah. Don't really have
your wife or your kids?
Oh, well, if they ever tune in, I just tell them that for them to be themselves, and that I love them very much.
Sure. So final thoughts.
It's good to hit on topics and get people's perspective on things, because I mean, at least the one thing that this is going to do is going to make people think, and if they look twice about doing X, Y, and Z, well, that's important, because at least you reach somebody. But, I mean, hopefully, they take something away from it and not just listen to two dudes talk.
Yeah, well, that's the point, really. And a guest I'm going to have, I invited to the studio, Anthony. He's an artist, and he told me that there's actually, like, a psychological aspect to it, in the point where, like humans have adapted to, in the world where, like, if they see something glimmering, that's because their natural instinct to find water to survive.
Sure.
Right? So he said, the higher-ups actually know that, and they use that and manipulate that. That's why everyone has all the jewelry and the bling and the shiny and the glimmer, the water, the drip, all the new language that they use, because that they're tapping into your most primitive instincts.
It's definitely a possibility. I can't say that it's not, I mean, ultimately, they take advantage of that in a lot of ways, whether it's
crocodile brain, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go into retail stores, the music's specifically played for specific reasons. The smells when you go into certain areas are for specific reasons. They're trying to get in tune with all your senses and whatnot. Visual, merchandising, marketing, everything, the front way things are facing, the levelness of things. You walk into a retailer,
it's all staged.
It is. It's
smoke and mirrors, people.
And it's everything, and our society's like that. It's not just the retail world and whatnot.
No, society is
Yeah.
staged. I know. That's the point. It's like, wake up and just do your own thing.
Well,
dude.
that's the problem. Is that, you know what? There's no one's successful by doing their own thing in other people's
you're
minds.
looked down on.
Yeah, and so I mean, dude, what they just need to be, like I said, if you're comfortable with yourself and you're happy with who yourself is, then it doesn't make a difference, you know. And that's the problem, is that too many people aren't that way. It really takes like a really great relationship with another individual, and then the two of you just end up shunning yourselves from society.
I
Why?
know.
Because you're great together.
I feel like I want to be part of the Beastie Boys. I wish I had a group I could just kick it with, but I don't think anybody would sign up with me for that, you know. But yeah, it's like if you have like-minded people that have the same goal, but good luck, you know. Good luck finding, you know, goal, task-oriented people that keep a schedule, people that are
Certainly.
okay with what other people say, and you know, ridicule and all that kind of shit too. So
Even if you do get two like-minded individuals, something usually happens in a partnership where things just, I mean, if you
it's
just
like two chefs in a kitchen, right?
yeah, look at the success of musicians and groups that have worked together and whatnot, actors, you know, like that have worked in films together. I mean, ultimately, you know, they don't finish out their lives together. You know, I mean, ultimately they go in their own ways. Someone does a solo album, someone writes a book, someone does something.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's good for the time being. You make money, you enjoy what you're doing and whatnot, and then it ends. You know, when it ends is up to the individuals, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more content. I apologize if you don't like our rants or our way of you know, looking at things. But it seems that things have changed. I'm a '90s baby, you know, and like everything has changed. I used to use flip phones and didn't have to use the area codes, and even back before that, you had house phones. And we've seen technology change. We're almost, the millennials feel like the gap between the ones above us and the one behind us.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening.
All right.
Cool.